Welcome to a Friday edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside a guy making his triumphant return to BTA from CBSSports.com. Brad Botkin is here. What's up, Brad?
All right, John, how you doing, man?
Great to have you on the show. I know you were on the show previously with Ashley, but not with me. So this is the first time you and I have done HQ stuff together, but this is the first time we've been on the show, this show together. It's very exciting.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Later in the show, we're going to go through Brad's top 30 most important players in the Olympics. He left off some huge names. You're going to be forced to answer for your sins on this one. I have a lot of issues with that list that we're going to discuss, Brad. But first, we're going to get into Team USA and Kevin Durant. He practiced on Wednesday. Steve Kerr said that there's going to be a big collaboration on whether and when he'll play. He's not going to play in the first game against Serbia on Sunday. Brad, one, how quickly should they be trying to move him along here? And two, how much do you think they need him?
I do think they need him, John. It's easy when you go into these tournaments, and I'm even guilty of it, somebody who watches an absurd amount of basketball and covers the NBA for a living. I'm even guilty of having this idea in my head that the non-NBA players and the other teams, outside of America, are just not at the level of the Americans, the depth and the wing. And every year I'm surprised. Every year it surprises me. It's like the definition of insanity. It fools me every time. And so it looks like they don't need Kevin Durant. It looks like they don't really need any individual player to any sort of significant degree. But they do. And I think what we always see in these international tournaments with the American teams is that they struggle in the half court. They struggle with fluidity. They struggle with creating consistent system-created shots. So they're going to get out and run. They're going to create havoc on the defensive end. They're going to do a lot of damage in transition. But sooner or later, some of these closer games are going to boil down to getting buckets in the half court. And without that continuity, without that ball and player movement that creates shots under ordinary circumstances and will create shots for a lot of the teams that USA will be up against, you need somebody to go and get you buckets. And I think Kevin Durant ultimately ends up being that player. He's an international cheat code, the shorter three-point line as a mid-range guy. He's indefensible in any basketball environment, but in the FIBA game, with that shorter three-point line, he's an absolute cheat code. He's the all-time leading scorer, not by coincidence in U.S. Olympic history. Three-pointers, free throws, everything. I think they will play it by ear. If they lose a group stage game, he's going to be in there, I think. If not, and they take this game by game, I think he shows up later in the tournament. And at some point, I think Kevin Durant becomes the difference between the Americans winning and losing a game.
I mean, as you mentioned, he's the all-time leading scorer for Team USA, right? And the other day he played in practice, looked good in the still photo that I saw of him getting dunked on by Ant Edwards as an amateur physician. Seemed fine to me. However, this is a tricky injury, right, Brad? I mean, like, he's got a calf. We know that calves can quickly, devolve into potentially an Achilles issue. It happened to him previously, back in 2019.
Some flashbacks.
What's that?
He's got to be having some flashbacks. I mean, I don't know if it's the exact same injury or where it's at on the calf, but I talked to a lot of doctors around the time that he was going through that in 2019, and a couple of them proved kind of prophetic that it was just like, you don't want to mess with a calf injury. And we've seen that with other guys. Damian Lillard, we've seen calf injuries taken a lot more seriously in terms of their return timetable since that Durant injury. So I think that's definitely a factor.
Yeah, so they got to be careful here. I'm sure he wants to be careful too, because the Olympics are great and I wish them well. But I'm sure that he's wondering, whether or not he'll be fully healthy for his Phoenix full season with the Suns in the NBA. I wanted to ask you just how you feel about this team, independent of the KD situation. It was a weird run up to the Olympics, right? I mean, they were 5-0. They won all 5 games. Not all of them looked good. Several of them looked pretty bad, including South Sudan. They squeaked past Australia. They were kind of hit and miss against Canada. The Serbia game was their best game. They're going to open with Serbia on Sunday. How do you feel about this team, 30,000-foot view?
Well, I think it's like I just said, to your point, they weren't dominant through the exhibition schedule. And I think that's what we're up for. Again, it's easy to look at these teams on paper and just sort of compare, okay, what are the NBA players, and look at it in a vacuum. And it just never really ends up playing out that way. You see guys with exponential impact, like a Dennis Schroeder, for instance. He's going to have exponential impact in this. You can't look at him through an NBA lens. Franz Wagner, a lot of these players, Bogdan Bogdanovic with Serbia. You put these guys in a one-game scenario with the green light that their national team affords them, and they can be superstar, not star. They can be superstar players in the form of a Patty Mills or Dylan Brooks. And so these teams are really good. And if you look at it, to your point, from 30,000 feet, yeah, the Americans are way better in terms of talent. They should be. I think they'll win the gold. But they're going to have tight games. And with this amount of talent, you're picking all the best players from the NBA, or most of them. All those guys are the best players because of similar qualities. And so you've got a lot of replicable, duplicate skill sets here where, Jason Tatum sort of does the same thing as Kevin Durant. He sort of does the same thing as Devin Booker. And so you have these 3 or 4 guys on the team that really have unique skill sets. I think LeBron's orchestration, Steph's shooting, Drew's defense, and Anthony Davis's defensive mobility. I think those are the 4 players, and I throw Bam Adebayo in there as sort of a JV version of Anthony Davis defensively. I think 4 or 5 guys are really the difference, where all these other guys on the American team, there's sort of diminishing returns on their talent because all these guys sort of do the same thing. And so they'll each play 15, 16 minutes. They'll each get 6 or 8 points. And it doesn't add up to as much as Dennis Schroeder getting 30. And so that's kind of how I see this. They're clearly the most talented team, but there's diminishing returns on that talent in this environment. And when propped up against these other teams that have more clarity in terms of scoring hierarchy, that's usually the wall that the USA runs into.
There's some redundancy there. Yes, I agree with you. On paper, I think or thought that should be a positive for them because they do have, they're 12 deep. Well, I guess minus Tyrese Halliburton, who is enjoying an all expenses paid trip to Paris and has been sort of phased out of the rotation.
Maybe he's a wild. We'll talk about him. He's a wild card.
Congratulations to Tyrese Halliburton. He's going to do some sightseeing. It seems like, but you sound worried to me. You sound like you're a little concerned about this. All right, let me ask you this. Because Bill and I, hold on. Bill and I did this the other day where we were comparing this roster to the Dream Team and to the Redeem Team. And we kind of came out on Dream Team greater than symbol, then this team, then greater than symbol Redeem Team. But the 2004 team that ended up finishing famously with the bronze medal and was like hugely disappointing. Are you telling, like, the way that you're talking right now, you sound like you feel like they're a little bit closer to maybe being disappointments like that than they are to winning the gold? No.
I think this team is a lot better than that team you're talking about. This team is stacked.
On paper, it should be, yeah.
This team is way better. I'm just saying from a macro look at just the USA, no matter who you put on these teams, I'm always surprised how close the games are. And so that's all I'm saying. What am I scared? Not really. I mean, honestly, I don't care if I want a competitive tournament from a viewing standpoint. This is not like we're at war here where I'm, like we got, I wouldn't be upset if the USA lost. I want a competitive tournament. That's what's exciting to me. So no, I'm not scared at all. I'm trying to learn from my past mistakes that you can't just look at the accumulation of talent on paper and say this is it's not going to be a blowout. I don't know exactly who's going to push them to the limit. I think Australia is very good. I think Canada is very good. I think Serbia is very good. And certainly France. We'll get into, I made some predictions today, but the top 2 teams from the group phase are guaranteed to be on opposite sides of the brackets. If you look at the groups, I think France and the USA both go undefeated in their groups, I think they end up on opposite sides of the bracket. I think they end up on a collision course for the gold medal. And let's just hypothetically, let's say we see that matchup. There's a real size problem against France. Sure. Evan Fournier can be one of those guys that turns into a FIBA god. They've got a lot of experience on that team. I don't think that they would play them and it'd be a 20-point game. I think they win by 7 or 8 points. So is that scared? No, no, I don't. I will never again make the mistake of looking at the names on the USA roster and thinking they're going to roll.
I make that mistake every time. I'm making it again. I'm making it again this time because they rolled out the roster and I was like, holy hell, this team is absolutely loaded. They should blow through every team that they play. And then they go out there against South Sudan. I'm like, that's a little curious to me. I'm a little surprised by this. They did play well against Serbia, although I felt like Serbia was kind of sandbagging a little bit in the second half. But you're right. I mean, there's some really good teams in this tournament. The odds, Team USA still the favorites, minus 450, 2-9 favorites on this, followed by Canada, France, Serbia, Germany, Greece, and Antetokounmpo, and then Australia, and then Spain at 50-1. Spain, always a good team, very long in the tooth, but they've been playing together forever. I think it's going to be a very good tournament. I'm super excited for it. We're going to take a break. On the other side, we're going to get into, you put together a comprehensive, scientifically crafted, you were crunching numbers, the top 30 most important players in the coming tournament for the Olympics. We're going to go through that, and I'm going to tell you why so many of them are wrong. Brad is here. We're very excited about this. You're listening to Beyond the Arc.
Football action continues. Are you ready for this? Ready to take chances? As the gridiron is taken over by the Great White North. It's time to storm the fortress. It's time to fight on the battlefield. Catch the Canadian Football League on CBS Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. John Gonzalez and Brad Botkin joining us on a Friday edition. Please find us wherever you get your favorite podcast. Download, subscribe, and leave a review. All right, for CBSSports.com, you wrote your 30 most important players at the Olympics. We're going to roll through this. But before we get through the actual names, we're going to do 15. We'll take a break, do the other 15. Then we'll talk about the ones you left off. Explain the premise, because you had a qualifier at the top for people like me who were like, wait a minute, you left some names off. So explain it to people like me.
Okay, you got to cut me some slack on this. This is a really tough line to navigate. But yes. So the way that I chose to break this down, because I didn't want to just take who are the 30 best players in a vacuum, because this tournament does not play out in a vacuum. So to our previous discussion, basically you get about 70% of each of the American players. They're playing different roles. They're playing less minutes. So you're not getting the Jason Tatum that the Boston Celtics have. You're not getting the Golden State, the Stephen Curry that the Golden State Warriors get. And so you have to keep that in mind when you're ranking what these players are going to be in the tournament, the depth of the particular teams that they're on, how many shots they're going to get, the sort of like intangible upswing that a player like Patty Mills gets when he puts on his country's jersey. Yeah, I'm sort of trying to pool all this together and draw up a case for the top 30 players in order in terms of the value that they bring to this tournament and their particular teams. So we're going to see a guy like Dennis Schroeder ranked higher than Stephen Curry. And it just is what it is. If you took Dennis Schroeder off Germany, they would be far more screwed than the USA team would be if Stephen Curry rolled his ankle. And so that's sort of the way that I approached this list.
You're starting to sell me on it. I can see you writing out the formula. It's very a beautiful mind. You've got like a chalkboard and you're writing equations on a window and a grease pen.
Keep in mind, John, I was in Sweden for the last 8 days. And so I was doing this list as I couldn't sleep. It's light. No one told me it's light 19 hours a day right there. So I was in a foggy state. It was 4 a.m. and let's factor that into the equation too.
You were in a fugue state, sleep deprived, and this is the list you came up with. We're going to run through it. All right, your top 5. No surprise here. Joker comes in at number 1. Giannis at number 2 for Greece makes sense to me. SGA at number 3 for Canada. It also makes sense. And then you've got 2 Americans, LeBron and Anthony Davis at 4 and 5. No quibbles here. And then this is where it gets interesting. After the top 5, that's where your guy. You're very high on Dennis Schroeder at 6. You have him higher than Wemby at 7. You have him higher, as you mentioned, than Steph Curry at 8, Jamal Murray at 9, and Rudy Gobert at 10. Let's just go back to Dennis Schroeder. Make the case.
Okay, if you want to put Wemby ahead of him, obviously,
I would.
Not gonna. Yeah, honestly, saying that, I don't know why I didn't. But okay, fine. Dennis
You didn't sleep.
Dennis Schroeder's. Yeah, I mean, okay, Schroeder's 7, Wemby 6, but Schroeder's a superstar in this environment. He's a superstar. He is. He's going to control the offense in the way that Damian Lillard controls his offense in the NBA. He's the go-to guy. We have seen him. We just saw it in the friendly. He's consistently in the paint. He's a guy that can get 25 even in a shortened FIBA game pretty naturally.
And they really let him cook.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Really
and Dennis Schroeder's a good player. So the bottom, even in the NBA, Dennis Schroeder can get 20 in any given game. And that's with having, maybe control of the second unit and 25 minutes. So it's just like you just sort of extrapolate that to him playing for his country that on a good German team that has other weapons. You can't just single him out like you can Rui Hachimura. He's really good. He's really tough to defend. He's going to get into the paint. He's going to spray the shooters, and he's going to get his points. He's just incredibly, I think, obviously valuable to Germany in a way that very few players on the American team, I think, are valuable to their team. I put LeBron and Anthony Davis ahead of him because I think the Americans are going to win the gold. And so ultimately, who the leaders of that team are more important to the ultimate outcome. And LeBron is going to orchestrate everything offensively, and AD is going to orchestrate everything. But I still could make the case that individually Dennis Schroeder means more to his team than even AD or LeBron do to the Americans.
Yeah, we saw what happened last year, right? I mean, he was the MVP of the World Cup. Germany won the World Cup. He obviously really works in that format. He understands international basketball. He's a bucket in FIBA play. I got no problems with that. I think it makes sense. I wanted to run this past you too. Your top 10, aside from Team USA having LeBron and Anthony Davis at 4 and 5, you've got 2 Canadians in SGA and Jamal Murray at 3 and 9, and then you've got 2 Frenchmen, Victor Wembanyama and Rudy Gobert at 7 and 10. If you had to pick one of those teams for, you kind of alluded to this earlier because of the way that the bracket would shape out here. You feeling like France is the bigger threat to that gold medal for Team USA than Canada?
Well, it depends on it depends where they meet in the tournament, because I think France has a better chance of getting out of their group undefeated than Canada. Canada's group is really evenly matched. Who is it? Australia, Spain, and
Group
Greece.
of death. Yeah.
So all those teams in the round robin could maybe deal each other a loss. And then if you're not one of the top 2 teams, you don't know what side of the bracket you're going to end up on. So, maybe Canada ends up playing the USA in the first quarterfinal game. It's a random draw. So, I mean, I guess they would have to beat them whether it's in the quarterfinal or the final.
Right.
But, I tend to think that once you get to the final, that game becomes more of like a game 7 wild card, anything can happen situation. But I do think Canada's a threat. I definitely do. And that's why I have Shea and Jamal Murray as high as I do, because outside of the US, the Canadians have the most NBA
hard play. It's so good.
They're really good. It's just that their top 2 guys are really, really important because they have a legit shot.
Yeah. Yeah, their guard play is so good. Their front line is a problem, but the guards and the wings are excellent. Let's run through 11 through 15. I'm having a little bit of fun with you when I'm messing around with the list here, but in all honesty, 11 through 15. So number 11, I love number 11. It's Drew Holiday. We're going to get into that in a second. Franz Wagner at 12, Josh Giddey at 13. Thought that was a little bit high for Josh, but I understand why, because of Australia. Bogdan Bogdanovic for Serbia makes sense at 14, and then Patty Mills at 15. I want to go back to Drew at 11.
Yeah.
This is somebody, Avery Johnson and I were talking about this on HQ when the roster was announced, and there were some people who were like, Drew Holiday, whatever. I think the casuals don't understand how damn good Drew Holiday is, how he does not hurt you anywhere, and he helps you everywhere. He's an all defense player. He can do everything. He fits in with everybody. If you need him to be the role player and do the dirty work, he can do that. He's an excellent distributor. He takes care of the basketball. He plays awesome defense. Explain to people why Drew Holiday is so critical for this team and why he's starting.
It's all about, well, everything you just said is true. All NBA defense is an understatement. He's the best. He's the best on-ball defender in the world still, and I don't think it's particularly close. His ability to impact the game without needing to be any sort of a focal point on a team like this, it provides such an important clarity to the rest of the team that we talked about earlier have some redundant skills. So he just has all the makings of the guy that the defense is going to lead, because you can't guard Drew Holiday when Jason Tatum and Steph Curry and LeBron James are out there, and he's going to kill him. Derek White's going to do the same thing. He's sort of a miniature version of Drew. Totally. He's going to get open threes. He's going to make 3 or 4 or 5 gigantic threes, swing threes in this tournament. He's going to get 10 or 11 points on really smart cuts. He's a great cutter. But mostly the reason he's ranked so high is because, again, there's 4 or 5 players on this team that do something that nobody else does. And nobody plays defense like Drew Holiday. If you go back to that championship that the Bucks won over the Suns, Giannis is going to
unbelievable.
Giannis is going to get the credit for that, deservedly so. Go back and watch the way that series swung when Phoenix went up 2-0 and Drew Holiday decided to stop letting Chris Paul do anything.
1,000%.
He can take you out of a game, and the flow that is so important for these European teams, he takes it away. He takes it away. You can't initiate your offense. You can't get any space. You start to get frustrated before the possession even starts. He is going to screw up everything. And I think he'll end up in the starting lineup with Anthony Edwards. He should. He's just an outstanding, phenomenal player. The second that the Bucks got rid of him for Damian Lillard and he wound up on Boston, last year's title was over. Barring injury, it was over. Every team this guy goes to gets demonstrably better because of all the things that we just talked about. He's unbelievable. I could have made a case. I honestly think I could have made a case that he's the most important USA player, maybe outside of LeBron.
You kind of just did, and I really enjoyed. They say that you got to know your audience. You know your audience. I'm the biggest Drew Holiday fan in the world, have been for a very long time, which is why it was so dispiriting, like you said, when he leaves the Bucks and he washes up with the Boston Celtics. It was great for Boston, bad for everybody else. We're going to take another break. We're through 15. As you might have noticed, some big names that Brad has not had on his list yet. We'll see whether or not he does on 15 through 30. On the other side, you're listening to Beyond the Arc. Welcome back to Beyond the Arc on a Friday. John and Brad hanging out. You're listening to us on a podcast. You can also check us out on our YouTube page. You can find that at Beyond the Arc CBS. Please subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment. You get to see Brad classing up the joint. He's wearing a jacket. I think it's amazing every time people come on the show. Sam Quid did the same thing. Colin Ward-Hediger did the same thing. Anytime anybody comes on the show, they get all fancy. We appreciate it. We appreciate you classing up because I'm not going to do it.
I've got my HQ set up in my house. I've got a jacket hanging and I just throw it on, man. Matter of habit. But I like knowing that I don't have to. Next time I'm on, I'm definitely rolling t-shirt.
You could come in a burlap sack and you'd fit in just fine. All right, let's go through the second 15 here. Yeah, just ripping off the jacket now, Hulk Hogan style. All right, 16, you've got Dylan Brooks. 17, Kevin Durant. 18, Evan Fournier. 19, RJ Barrett, and then at 20, you've got Bam Adebayo. I'm going to go, all right, you've made the case for Kevin Durant. We already talked about him earlier. This is where I start to take my leave on France. You have Evan Fournier at 18. You were talking about Evan Fournier could potentially go off. He could be a problem for Team USA or any team trying to get the gold medal. If Evan Fournier is the reason why there's a roadblock for another team, then fine. Like, I'm just not buying that.
Yeah. I do agree with that. In this instance, I guess my ranking in Fournier isn't necessarily the projected impact I think he's going to have, but his.
You have Nick Batum. We're going to get to Nick Batum. You have Nick Batum at 26. I'd have Nick Batum where you have Evan Fournier.
Yeah. It's fair. I think Fournier has a higher ceiling to win one game. And in my mind, Evan Fournier, because the downfall on France, and I looked at a lot of this through the matchup of, okay, if you end up playing the USA, they're going to have to try to make ends meet in the backcourt. They're going to present problems with their interior, obviously.
Sure.
But can they keep up with all of USA's perimeter scoring? I don't see any way that they could do that unless Evan Fournier goes off. I'm not necessarily suggesting that I think he will. I think that his importance in a single game that France may need to win to medal or gold medal, he becomes like super, super exponentially important. I don't know if he'll actually come through with that kind of pressure and need to be that good. But I do think he's the one guy on France that has the ability for one game to just go nuts, where I think Nick Batum is more probably he is a better player.
He's just, he's even. There's like a baseline of talent, like a higher floor, but a lower ceiling.
A lot more things. And we saw 100%. It in that last game 6 against the Knicks where he had a huge game, but you really look at it, he had 16 points. Like I'm talking 30 if you're going to keep up with the USA backcourt. So that's why I had the potential of Fournier to do that for one game at the right time is still there.
Yeah, he absolutely can do that. He absolutely can go off. But yeah, I think you're right that just in terms of like being a baseline good player, Nick Batum does more things, but we'll see. Maybe Evan Fournier does get hot. 21 through 25, we've got Santi Aldama, who's, I believe, the only NBA player on Spain, Lou Dort, Jose Alvarado, Ant Edwards, and Jason Tatum at 24 and 25. This was interesting to me. You've got them grouped together. I think that makes sense. Ant made his proclamation earlier before, when camp was going on, that he was the best player on the team. I love watching him. I love his bravado. What are we expecting? We just saw, the still photo of him dunking on KD at practice the other day. Between these two, you place a little bet for me. Who do you think has the better tournament?
Well, it depends how you want to evaluate who has the better tournament. As I wrote in my list, I think Jason Tatum is the most overqualified gap filler imaginable. That's what he's going to be on this team. He's not going to be
a luxury.
Unbelievable. And to your point, when you look at this team and Jason Tatum's your gap filler, it's like, how are they going to lose? I mean, I get that. But yeah, he's going to score 6 or 7 points in a lot of games. He's going to have 3 assists. He's going to have 6 rebounds. He's not going to be a go-to guy. Whereas I think Anthony Edwards has a higher ceiling, if only because of that bravado that you just mentioned, where he really thinks he's the best player in the world. I question some of his shot pass decision. Sure. But if he is erring on the side of shooting and he's hot, he has the potential, I think, to become one of the go-to scorers for America in a way that Jason Tatum doesn't. My ranking reflects the fact that I don't think that'll come to fruition. I think Anthony Edwards ends up being an important starter. He'll draw defensive attention. I think he'll do what KD does for this team when KD's not there, in terms of when it's kind of bogs down in the half court. He's a guy that I think can consistently get into the paint and create his own shot. And I think they'll lean on him for stretches for that. And I think he'll have stretches in this tournament where he looks like the best player in the world. But overall, I think he'll score 12 points a game and play really good defense and just not be completely somebody that you can't live without for the Americans. I think he'll be just another good player.
Yeah. And he is such a luxury. We're talking about those redundancies earlier. Like to have Jason Tatum, who can play at both ends of the floor and just won a championship and got a max contract and be exactly what you said, a guy who's just going to be solid and you don't have to worry about, it's fantastic. the Edwards thing is interesting to me because, as you mentioned, his shot pass selection, part of the problem I thought with the run up to the Olympics in those 5 games was you saw the way that a lot of FIBA teams play, passing the ball, a lot of ball movement, a lot of 3-point shooting. There was a lot of ISO from Ant, and I enjoy watching him. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the NBA, and certainly to listen to and talk to. I just wonder about his fit with this style of play in this situation. You know, he can get hot. Maybe he gets super hot in the tournament and ends up being a value to them. But I wonder. I want to see it play out. 26, 26 through 30. Rounding out your list here, you've got Nick Batum, Kelly Olynyk, Derek White, Dyson Daniels, and Andrew Nembhard. Now we don't really need to get into these guys because we round out that list and some massive names did not make your cut of the 30 most important players in the Olympics, including, you know, I was making fun of Tyrese Halliburton getting an all expenses paid trip. He didn't make the cut. That's fine. I got no problems with that. You left Joel Embiid and Devin Booker off. Make the case.
Okay. Bottom line, I don't really love Joel Embiid playing on the team. I kind of have that traditional, like, I know he's, you know, he's a citizen and I get it, but I just, on a team this stacked, I would prefer, from a viewing standpoint, I would prefer he was playing for a team that had a chance to take out the United States. That's what would be more fun for me. But even discarding that,
were you one of those people screaming to at him to give back his French passport? Were you in that line?
Well, he has from what I've read, he really has no tie to France. It's just from a basketball standpoint, I don't like all the best kids in 5th grade ganging up at recess. I like, you know what I mean? If I was Joel Embiid, I would rather play for a team that was good enough to beat them. I wouldn't want to go play for Japan, but I would want to play for a team that I could make a meaningful difference in potentially beating. Just from a competitive standpoint, I would want. If I was Kevin Durant, I wouldn't have went to the Warriors in 2016. I think it's more fun to play that way. So fine. But on this team, he's just not necessary. He's not necessary. Now, in a matchup with France, they're really big. With Serbia, maybe he caused some problems with Nikola Jokic, which
Germany a little bit.
But Anthony Davis is going to be the guy they go to when if a game is close. That's just the bottom line.
He fits better with the FIBA style.
Exactly. So you just talked about the ball movement, the player movement. Joel Embiid is not going to be able to just dribble down into the post for 7 seconds and draw a foul. And he's not going to be getting consistent face-up jumpers where they're playing through him at the elbow. So he's not some great double-team passer. He's not some great ball mover. He's immobile defensively. We saw it through the exhibition game. I mean, yes, on sheer talent, on sheer size, he's going to have I would guess he's going to have a few surges in a couple games, some 4-minute stretches where it's like, whoa, that's why we have Joel Embiid. He just got 6 straight points. But overall, if you take Joel Embiid off this team, nobody is saying, oh my God, the Americans are in trouble. By contrast, if you take off whoever let's go.
Dyson Daniels.
Okay, listen, I know it sounds crazy, but if you take Dyson Daniels, they need everyone. Australia needs everyone to medal. And I think people who watch basketball, Dyson Daniels, the defense that he plays.
Yeah, we
talked about Drew Holiday. It's important. It's the only chance. Australia's not going to go in and outshoot or outscore. Like, you've got to get some stops. You've got to win on some margin. Andrew Nembhard, to me, as a guy for Canada, we saw what he did for Indiana, where he was the best player in that conference finals series against Boston. Andrew Nembhard can flat out win a game by himself in these Olympics for Canada. He can come off the bench and get 24 and win a game. Joel Embiid could sprain his ankle, and USA would still be the odds-on favorite to win. So that's my case.
It's interesting because, I was looking at Kelly Olynyk and I'm like, come on, Brad, what are we doing here? But because Canada their front line is not good. Right. Kelly Olynyk is easily their best front line player. If you lose Kelly Olynyk, all of a sudden I'm doing the Brad Botkin theory of the case here, but you lose Kelly Olynyk off of that team when he's your best front line player on a thin front court, then all of a sudden it becomes a massive problem for the Canadians. And you're right. If Joel Embiid, for this team. He's on the team because he's Joel Embiid. He's on the team for some specific matchups, as you mentioned, Serbia and Germany, couple of France, where you're going to play him some critical minutes, but really Anthony Davis fits better. And if you lost Joel Embiid off this team, if he was playing for France, you'd still favor the Americans to win this thing. Is that your theory? Like the same idea on Devin Booker? Because I'm not super high on Devin Booker on this team either.
Even more because
I think so too. Even more
because with Joel Embiid, I still would argue. Let's say he went down, and then let's say Anthony Davis went down. I still would argue that Kerr would close with Bam. So I really think in crunch time, Joel Embiid is the third center on this team. I really do think that. Booker, he's an awesome player, just surrounded by more awesome players. That's all. I wrote
so much redundancy
on Canada, and he's the number 2 guy. He's like the 6th most important player in the tournament. He could win Canada the gold medal. But on this team, it's like he's a really good all-around player, but he's not Jason Tatum. He's a good shooter, but he's not Curry. He's a better creator than people realize, but he's not LeBron. He's a good defender. He plays defense, but he's not Drew. So everywhere you look, the skills that he provides, he's like number 2 or 3 in terms of the hierarchy in that particular column. And you add it all up, Devin Booker is just a flat-out rotational player for this guy. Same as Joel Embiid. He's going to have some surges here where they're bogged down in the half court, and he is a guy that can get to his mid-range game and provide some buckets to keep you afloat during some dry spells. He'll have some moments, but he's just not that important to the team. Again, all the guys that are in the top 25, if you take them out to varying degrees, the USA loses a little bit of credibility as the far and away gold medal winner. Devin Booker and Joel Embiid do not move that needle very much.
Of those guys that were snubs, so you make good cases here. I mean, you're starting to convince me a little bit, but other guys who got snubbed: Dante Exum, Rui Hachimura, Mo Wagner, Willie Hernan Gomez, and his brother Wancho, who, no love for Bo Cruz from Hustle. That hurts me.
I know.
Bilal Coulibaly. Of these guys, Yuta Watanabe, of the group that got snubbed, who was the one that you think, that was really hard to leave off?
Well, it's not a guy like Rui is, again, a better
Rui's
player.
A good one.
Yeah, he's a good one. He's a better player, and he obviously means a ton to Japan, because obviously. But Japan just has no chance. So on some level, I'm sort of just they're so insignificant in the tournament that I just don't care if Rui gets 40. He's not going to impact this tournament.
Right.
And so that was some of the case also with some of the Spain guys. I like Spain collectively. I think
me too.
But,
they've been playing together forever.
They have, but it's not the Gasol brothers. It's not Rubio. Rudy Fernandez is old.
Rudy Fernandez is 39 years old. He's out here like he's LeBron, Spanish LeBron.
Yeah, exactly. So, Herman Gomez, these guys, they play through their bigs. Those guys are really important. You could have made a case for Herman Gomez to be in there because I do think Spain has a chance to get out of the group. I think they will get out of the group.
You mean Willie, not Bo Cruz, right?
Yeah, I mean it's like it's tough to distinguish. It's to be honest with you, but yeah, I just don't think that those guys that you mentioned, I don't think their teams are relevant enough to warrant a top 30. I do think their importance to their particular team is certainly outsized. I could have picked somebody off Brazil in that regard, whoever the best player is on Brazil, but they're insignificant in the tournament.
Fun list, fun to quibble with. Everybody should check it out on cbssports.com. Brad put a lot of effort into it while he was sleep deprived. What else? Tell people what else you got cooking.
Well, it's all Olympics right now, so I'm really into these games, John. It sounds like you are too. I just think this is so fun. I love the in-season tournament. I'm all for these different variations of basketball, different competitive environments, different structures. I love to see these storylines play out where I think and we've gotten really smart about basketball talk and sophisticated, but in some ways the basketball conversation is still really, really primitive. And it's still in a lot of people's heads just comes down to who jumps the highest and who runs the fastest. And we still hear things like Steph Curry's not a great athlete. Luka Doncic is not a great athlete. Nikola Jokic is not a great athlete. Let me tell you something. These guys are unbelievable athletes, hand-eye coordination, dexterity, basketball skills, and we're still a little late to that party. And we still think that the Americans, because they're the best, they're always the best athletes. They're always the guys that jump off the page from AAU days on forward. We always think they're the best players. And in this environment, that doesn't always prove to be true. You're getting about 70% of each one of these players, while you're getting 1,000% of Patty Mills playing for his country. And in that kind of environment, I am just psyched to watch the tournament, to watch how hard I think USA is going to have to fight. I want to see them in a game against Canada or France or Australia where it's a 4-point game with 4 minutes to play and LeBron has to put his head down and start shouldering people to the rim, or Steph Curry's got to hit a three with his whole country relying on it. It's just a whole different thing. I'm super pumped about it. And then after that, I will turn all my attention to the Warriors getting Lauri Markkanen. I'm a Northern California guy. I mean, one freaking time, Mike Dunleavy, give Steph a chance. Give me Markkanen. Get rid of whoever we need to. Give Steph a chance. That's all I care about until training camp.
I would love Lauri Markkanen on the Warriors. I think they'd have to give up. I think they'd have to give up Pajemski in that deal, and like that rookie contract is very valuable. You don't care. Rookie contract very valuable.
It is, but my fandom. I'm 45 years old. My fandom's running low, so I don't think I'm going to care about the Warriors in 4 years. So this is a real selfish thing. I want to ride out Curry's into the. I want to take one more shot at a 5th ring, and then it's like when I'm 50, I'm not going to care if Podziemski, if Kuminga is playing for the Hornets. I'm just not going to care. So that's where I'm at.
Our producer Aaron is also a Warriors fan, and you know, man, I just wish it would finally work out for you guys. If you could just get another champion, you know, like I'm from Philadelphia, and I just want nice things for Warriors fans.
But you gotta keep in mind. You gotta keep in mind, John. I grew up with a barely an NBA team. So it's like I got Run TMC for a little bit. I got the
Run TMC was awesome.
That was really in the prime of my childhood. But for the most part, us Northern California folk earned this dynasty. That's the hill I'm dying on.
I've been watching. I don't know who you're talking to here. I've been watching the Sixers my whole life. I was in Philadelphia working for NBC Sports Philadelphia during the entire process. Those teams that won like 19 games covered all of those. It was brutal. You guys have it just fine.
Philadelphia guy, were you at least in the early stages pumped about what the process might create?
Absolutely. I mean, look, your mileage may vary on what it actually did create, but from an academic standpoint, until the league stepped in and forced not one but 2 Colangelos on the franchise, like talking to Sam, everybody had the wrong. I hate to make this about the process, but talking to Sam, everybody had this idea that like Sam was aloof and like, you know, he was a shut in and didn't talk to the media and whatever. Sam talked to the media all the time. He just didn't do it on camera. And when you sat with him and you talked to him about his vision and what he was trying to build from an academic standpoint, it made total sense to me. I was very excited about it. And then all of a sudden, you know, the palace intrigue and the Kremlinology came in and he ended up leaving. And that was a real shame because there was a moment there where you could see like it was starting to develop and all the pieces that he put in place, and they ended up screwing him. But it didn't work out for Philly because it never works out for Philly. But I really want it to work out for Warriors fans yet again. It's been 2 years that you guys haven't had a championship. I can't believe it.
It's been rough, and I'm rooting for Philly too, though. I hope Paul George makes the difference. We kind of always make this mistake thinking that Paul George is gonna, you know, we did it when he went back to OKC. We did it when he went to the Clippers, and now we're doing it with the Sixers. Like he's the championship piece, and it doesn't ever really work out that way. But he's pretty perfectly suited there, and I hope Maxey and Embiid stay healthy. And I would like to see Philadelphia make a run. It's a fun team. I like Nick Nurse. I like the mobility they put back in that offense. But you're right about that the process and what that was. I remember when that first playoff run, I was covering that series in Miami. Man, they looked good when they had Bellinelli out there shooting and they had Saric shooting. Magic Johnson. I mean, it was like, yo, this team is no joke. That stinks that didn't stick around.
Well, we'll see. Basketball analyst John Gonzalez thinks what you just said, that they put together. Daryl did a very nice job putting a team together. Longtime Philadelphian John Gonzalez thinks it's all going to collapse and come apart because that's what happens. Go and read everything that Brad Botkin writes. He's very smart. He's very talented. He's excited like I am about the Olympics, which starts this weekend. We're going to be back at it on Sunday with Bill and I believe Ashley on YouTube following Team USA versus Canada. And then on Monday, we're on CBS Sports Network at 2 p.m. Eastern. So be sure to check that out. Don't miss that. We're going to have all of your Olympic coverage right here on Beyond the Arc. But for now, for Brad Botkin, I am John Gonzalez. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody, and have a great weekend.